There are some things in your life that you do that you know on some level are morally wrong. Yes, I have this habit. Yes, I say these words. I'm just tired. You justify yourself. You explain yourself. You minimize what you're doing. Now, you don't make the argument that what you're doing is not wrong. C.S. Lewis had a brilliant insight on this. He said, if someone steals your orange, you say, hey, you stole my orange. They might explain why it's not that big of a deal, but they won't make the case that stealing isn't wrong. They minimize, they rationalize, they justify. And we do the same thing. When there's something in your life that you know morally isn't the right thing to do. In fact, the people who know you, maybe they even stopped bringing it up. Because anytime they've brought it up, you had a reason, you had an excuse, you could justify it. You are the ones, Jesus said, who justify yourselves in the eyes of men. But God knows the heart. And to this audience, for this reason, Jesus preaches a sermon on hell. And I'm going to give you the big idea of his sermon up front because, when it comes to hell, we get all these questions, and is it really fire and a lake of fire, and is the devil in charge? I want to really narrow your focus in on the big idea that Jesus had when it came to his teaching on hell. Here it is. Self-justification, the practice of excusing, of minimizing, of rationalizing, of justifying our immoral behavior on whatever level it is. Self-justification leads to self-decomposition, to the destruction of self, the decomposition of self, the decay of self, the destruction of self. And this, Jesus said, is the true nature and essence of hell. Here's the reason why. Humanity was made to live forever with God. In the beginning, when God created Adam and Eve, they lived in the presence of God. Life centered on God. Our lives orbited around God. They walked with him. They lived with him. And there was a world without death or decomposition or decay or destruction. But as soon as sin entered the world, the destruction began, the decomposition of self began. That's why Jesus came into the world, to eliminate our sin, the thing that is destroying us. But when someone chooses sin over Christ, or I should say, self over God, it begins a journey down a path to utter destruction, disintegration, and the decomposition of yourself. That's what Jesus had to say about hell. So to these Pharisees, who are masters of practicing self-justification, he taught this sermon. He said, there was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. So Jesus starts to tell a story. There's going to be two characters, and the first character was a man who was exceptionally wealthy. This guy was so rich. He wore purple clothes, not just on Friday night, on every day of the week. And Jesus said he had fine linen. Now, this would have been very high-quality linens, white linens imported from Egypt that were used to make their undergarments. So Jesus is saying, this guy didn't just look good, he felt good. Now, you hear that and you're like, huh? Everybody in his audience would have been like, I wish I could be that guy. Purple clothes and nice undergarments. You're not jealous. Do you know why? Because if you want, you can buy all the purple clothes you want. Your undergarments can even be purple if that's what you want, right? It doesn't matter. We're not jealous of this guy, but they were, because this was the richest life they could imagine in their generation. So as an aside, whatever your rich life is that you get envious of, people in the future will laugh at you. They will. I mean, if you are an average middle-class American, you live a more luxurious and higher quality of life than the richest people on planet Earth 1 century ago. So we listen to this story and we're like, really? He was rich? Jesus is like, yes. And everyone in his audience wanted to be that guy. He has arrived. He flaunts his wealth. He is absurdly wealthy. He is living the good life. Here's the second character. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. Now, the law of Moses commanded that a wealthy person was to help the poor, to give aid to the poor. So someone had come along, said, here's a rich man. Clearly he can afford to help the poor. Lazarus was laid at his gate, and he longed to eat table scraps, but did not get any. That's why he longed them. The rich man had no pity on him. He had no mercy on him. And I'm sure he could have justified why he did not help the poor man. Lazarus just lays there all day. He should get a job. Why should I pay my bills and his bills? I worked hard for my money. However he justified himself, I'm sure he could do it. But the dogs had more compassion on Lazarus than this wealthy man had on Lazarus. Now, what's interesting is in all the stories Jesus taught, in all the stories he told to make a spiritual point, only one character is ever given a name, and it's this one, Lazarus. And the name Lazarus, when translated from the Hebrew, means the one whom God helps. So the irony is dripping for his first century audience. You have one man who has everything. You have another man who has nothing. Yet, this guy who has nothing is the one whom God helps. Looks like God's helping the other guy more than Lazarus. But Jesus is making a point. You are measuring reality in the context of birth to death. God measures true reality in the light of eternity. So the stage is set. The rich man, poor Lazarus. The rich man is not helping. Poor Lazarus, the one whom God helps. Verse 22. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. Now, just as they were totally different in life, they could not be more different in death. I'm sure the rich man would have had a very extravagant funeral, but that's the end of his story. He died and was buried. Lazarus, in those days, likely would have been thrown into the town dump. A beggar with no family to look after him would have been tossed into the dump to decompose, yet he gets an angel escort, not straight to heaven, but straight to Abraham's side. He gets to heaven, and he's not told, yeah, you can go stand in the corner. He is positioned in the wedding feast of heaven at Abraham's side. Abraham is the father of the Jewish faith and the Jewish race, and Lazarus is honored in his presence. In the kingdom of heaven, Lazarus was someone who is right up there standing next to Abraham. That's how God's kingdom works. He is now receiving extravagant honor and privilege and glory in the kingdom of heaven. In the eternal context, he is the one whom God helped. He lived for eternity. Now, here's what happens. In hell, where he was in torment, he, the rich man, looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. So he sees, wow, Lazarus is moving up in the world. So he called to him, Father Abraham, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire. Now, many people wonder, is hell literally fire for eternity, where people are burned up without being burned up and they're in agony in that way? Or is this some kind of metaphor for something different? Well, different theologians have different conclusions and assumptions about that, but I will tell you this much. If it's a metaphor, it means the reality is really bad. Really bad. But I think fire is, if it is a metaphor, I think it is appropriate, and here's the reason why. If you throw a log into fire, it will slowly disintegrate. It will slowly deteriorate. It will slowly break down, and hell is the decomposition of yourself. To which we say, wait a minute. This is what you talked about before, where it's not fair. How can 70 or 80 years of sin lead to infinite suffering in hell? That's disproportionate. The punishment doesn't fit the crime. It feels like executing someone for stealing a loaf of bread. And if that's your conclusion, you are making a false assumption about people in hell. You are assuming that they stop sinning. You are assuming that they say, God, I was wrong. God, I am sorry. God, I regret everything I've ever done. That's your assumption. But the picture Jesus gives us of hell shows us just the opposite.